Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Episode 17. Upgrade your EIQ, which is more commonly termed emotional intelligence. This is a topic that some of our listeners may know some things about. They may have even heard the term, maybe through, like I did, through a psychology class that I was initially introduced in. Sometimes they use it during corporate settings and all that kind of stuff. And even throughout time, you hear people talking about IQ all the time, about somebody just being smart. Right. But we're going to actually be talking today about your emotional intelligence and how it actually can impact and affect your relationships and how you should bring it into your relationships. So your emotional intelligence, like I said, it's more commonly known as EQ, but during the show, we're going to call it
EIQ.
EIQ. And we're going to be talking about that next on this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee.
Yes, we will. So as we
mentioned earlier, I think I heard this initial term about IQ or EI or emotional intelligence. It actually was in a class that I actually took. And people may be familiar with Dr. Daniel Goldman, who was the guy who actually kind of coined the term. A lot of people have used it for things, and his book, and I've read his book and reviewed it and all that kind of stuff before, but that was something that was kind of a contributor for the foundations of this course. But we're going to be sharing some information throughout this topic about your emotional intelligence that, like I said, it came up in a psychology class that I took years and years ago. I've always been interested in psychology, but I just want to get done with that class.
Right.
I remember that, I wasn't trying to even take something in and try to make it my own, like you should do when you hear information, whether it's in school or people you talk to.
Even when you read the Bible.
Yeah, especially.
It has to be applicable.
You have to apply it. Like we say, you don't have a knowledge problem.
We have an application
We have
problem.
application problems usually, but I should have been more attentive to that class because I think it would have probably saved me some struggles with my emotions. And I say this because I am a Star Trek fan. I know that you're probably saying, what does that have to do with this? Well, I'm going to tell
Everything
you.
Is well,
I'm going to tell you because my favorite character on Star Trek was Spock.
Yes.
And the reason why I liked Spock was he was void of emotions. That was the whole point that he was trying. I was like, man, I could identify with that.
Oh. Yeah.
I know that sounds weird.
No.
But because, and that
I'm
kind of.
sure lots of people identify with Spock.
Well, whether they identify with it or not, I did because I didn't even want to deal with emotions. I thought they were just, ugh.
Right.
Why did you even want to do those things? It just makes you feel all funny sometimes.
You are hilarious.
But we're going to talk about it. And I wish I would, like I said, have taken some of that information in during that class time. But now I see how it makes an impact in today's life, I should say.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're going to be sharing some things with you that we've discovered even over time that we have learned and incorporated into our lives as it relates to emotions and emotional intelligence, and that you can take and apply it into anybody who may be listening. That if you're familiar with the topic, great. But if you're not, this may be something very interesting to see. What did you think about?
And the thing that I love about emotional IQ is, whereas your IQ, you have no control over it. Mm-hmm. You can't make it go up or down. It's basically, you kind of get what you get.
Yeah,
you
your
don't
inherited
have a fit.
smarts.
However, the EQ is something that you totally have control over. And you can, that's why I said upgrade your EIQ, because there are things that you can do, because it's really more of a skill than something that is innate or natural.
Right.
It's something that you're taught. It's something that you can work on. And so our whole purpose in this is when we say work on your marriage, work on your relationships, we want to talk about the things, although we do address things you don't have control over, and we try to help you to how do you maneuver that. But I thought that this was wonderful because it really shows that while there are common denominators in people who are successful,
right.
and it might not be your IQ, it might be your EIQ.
Yeah, your emotional intelligence is very important because it's not so much how much you know, like you said, as it pertains to a topic or
Right.
your career or your ability. It's how much you're in tune with your emotions.
And the emotions of the people around you.
And exactly, because if you're in any kind of leadership position or you're a boss or a supervisor or even a parent.
Or if you're a subordinate.
Because the more you can identify with your own emotions, or even, and we're going to talk about it here in a sec, get to the empathetic side of listening to someone. We mentioned that in one of the other episodes about empathetic listening, that it's going to help you become a better boss, supervisor, parent, or whatever.
Husband, boyfriend. Brother,
relation, because
sister, friend.
Because that is going to be so critical to understanding how it actually plays into, you know, your emotions, and how it actually plays into to have success in life and in relationships.
And, you know, of course, for me, you know, I look at it from every perspective, but I definitely wanted to find what are the scriptures, what does the Bible say about your emotional intelligence?
Right.
And there are 38 different verses in the Bible that suggest or they give reference to your emotions and how they can affect you. And the one that I like, because, you know, I've said before that my love language is words of affirmation.
Right.
And Proverbs 12:18 said, there is no, the one who uses harsh words is like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing.
Right.
And so I thought that was wonderful because, like, what does that have to do with your emotional IQ? Well, a person who has a high emotional IQ is going to be very sensitive about the impact that their words have on other people.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You're not going to just say, well, it's the truth. And I remember in my younger years, because of my personality type, me feeling like, well, it's the truth. But as you mature and as you become aware of your emotional IQ, you begin to realize that the things that you do and say are either going to affect or infect people.
Right.
And so this is a very great place because it gives hope to those people who feel like, well, this is just the way that I am. Nothing can ever change. There are lots of things about us that we can't change, but then there are things that we can change. And I think that it's important for us to focus on working on what we have. Like we say, you always say, control your controllables.
Yeah, and it's so funny because as we were, even when we come up with the topics that we're going to cover during the show, we kind of meditate and think about and pray about these things all week and kind of work on it. And I start writing soon, but a lot of times, a lot of the information doesn't come down until later for some reason. You know, maybe it's just from meditating on it. But one of the things that I realized in even doing this is I wanted to apply this to me.
Yes.
You know, especially because we always are going to be getting better, and that
we should be.
Well, you should be striving to it, because I want to be more emotionally healthy, especially as it pertains to our relationship with each other and with others that I interact with, and be better for it. But you said it just here a second ago that there are some things we like to always talk about. Where are you at right now?
Right.
And we want to provide some information about that to kind of give you some checks to say, where are you at right now to kind of determine your emotional intelligence level right now. And one of those things you do is there's some common indicators that you mentioned just a second ago about healthy emotions.
And when you say that, you know, people want to get healthy, well, what does that look like? Well, this is an area that can really help you become healthy, because a part of it is understanding yourself, understanding your growth areas and your strengths, you know, and so this is a part of helping you become healthy, and that's what this whole show is designed to do.
Yeah, because you always want to start out, let's say, we deal with this even before in some of the other episodes. We always talk about assessment. Start out where you're at right now. You need to know and have a good understanding of where you're at today, right now. You know, even as you listen to this, where you can listen to some of the things that I'm going to give right now during this kind of rundown, that you can say, where do I sit at in reference to these things? So these are some indicators that are a few indicators that you can do if you have a low emotional intelligence. This is starting out with one, and I'll let you even comment if things come up to your mind.
Do you have the examples of the low? Okay, go ahead.
And some of them, even in the explanation, is going to be, do you get, number one, do you get into arguments all the time? Not just with people who are closer to you. These are people who seem to be always in conflict. Sometimes it's always seem like they want to debate everything. Sometimes it'll come off as I'm just debating, or I'm just I like the term
argumentative.
I'm just saying.
Right.
That is kind of, it's an opinion, but when you are always debating and arguing is an indicator that low emotional intelligence. And we're going to wrap all this up when we give some of the later things of why all these things come into play. The next one will be, you don't understand how other people feel. You're completely oblivious to other people's feelings.
Right.
You kind of ignore them. You
dismiss them
very easily.
You belittle them.
And sometimes you may not even really be mad at them about a situation or something like that. It's literally like you are totally oblivious to them.
You only see things through the scope of your own life.
Right. Number 3, you think that others are overly sensitive. You tend to look at somebody, you think about this now as it pertains to emotional intelligence. This is someone who is actually, if you have a low emotional intelligence, this is all about feelings and being empathetic and understanding someone else's feelings. So if you always think somebody else is you're just being sensitive.
Right.
That's you being, again, oblivious to somebody else's feelings and totally overshadowing how they are feeling because you
don't feel that way.
Exactly. And these are things that you may not even be aware of. It's not that sometimes it's not even necessarily being malicious or premeditated where you thought about it and like, I'm going to be that way.
Right.
Sometimes these things have just developed over time.
Right.
Through situations and circumstances.
And it goes back to childhood of origin issues.
Oh, yeah.
If you've grown up in an environment, that was the other show about dysfunctional families. If you grew up in a dysfunctional family, then you probably do have a low emotional IQ because of the environment that you were raised around and the people. And if everybody that's in your sphere of influence has a low emotional IQ, you won't even be aware
that
there's a such thing as a high emotional IQ.
Right. It's almost like you just doing as everybody else does.
Yeah, you're just going through life, but you're not really thriving in relationships.
Right. Number 4, you refuse to listen to other people's point of view. You smile about that one.
I just think it's funny because one of the things when we're doing the show about dysfunctional relationships, it talks about when you the things that how you become as an individual as a result of growing up in a dysfunctional family. But it talks about the introvert, that when you do something to offend the introvert, that instead of them confronting you, you'll know that you've made an introvert mad because they won't talk to you.
They'll get even more quiet.
They'll text you. They'll email you. And to me, when you think about the introvert, that is something that's more of a bend. But your emotion, even you can be an introvert with a high emotional IQ.
Sure.
So to me, I think that when I think about grace, what grace is God lending his strength to us. I think emotional IQ is a gift to us to compensate for the things that we have no control over.
Yeah, that's good.
And I love that. There's always, regardless to how bad things are, regardless to where you grew up, God always has a way of an escape for us. Sure. And so to me, when you look at what emotional IQ, we're listening to that show and it's talking about schools that begin to detect kids with high emotional IQs when they're young. So, and even with Manette, she's starting a school soon, and she talks about the different types of intelligence.
Right.
And so if we only focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic, we're ignoring all the other parts of what makes a person valuable. And a part of what makes us healthy in relationships is adding value to people's lives.
Sure.
And when we have a low emotional IQ, it's really impossible to add value to people's lives because the only person you're thinking about is
you.
You.
Yeah. So this is actually talking about the they refuse to see other people's point of view, they have trouble even admitting when they're wrong. And they will defend that position with some serious enthusiasm, and they're often very pessimistic.
Yes.
You know, in that position, and they're critical of others. It's the first response versus the last thing to think about. They kind of navigate to that. They blame others. This is somebody with a low emotional intelligence. It's that deflection. We talked about it before. They got that blame thrower out, and they actually are just looking to deflect blame. They have trouble owning when they do something wrong, or have, instead they kind of refuse to think about, how did I contribute to this problem? You know, they justify what they did. Well, I did this because you did that.
Right.
If you ever hear that, that's an indicator
of somebody with a
low emotional intelligence.
Because a person with a high emotional IQ,
they own it.
Instead of saying, I'm mad at you because you hurt me, a person with a high emotional IQ would say, when you did that, that hurt me.
Right.
And so how I want to let you know that what you did hurt me. It's a difference between me blaming you and me owning how it made me feel.
Sure.
And there's a total difference between that.
Yep. They don't like dealing with the emotionally charged situations. When emotions are kind of getting revved up, they kind of shut down.
Right.
Not necessarily, you don't even have to be an introvert for this. They literally will check out. I'm out. Physically, sometimes they'll leave the room or leave the situation. They'll flee or just say, get away. I got to get out of here. Because they don't want to deal with the emotions that are rising up, even on the inside of them, because somebody with a low emotional intelligence doesn't know how to deal with that. And we're going to give you some indicators, some things that you can practice that will help you with a low emotional intelligence. The other one is they have sudden emotional outbursts. They tend to want to this can be highs and lows.
Right.
You know, it's finding that equilibrium, that balance between the two where you're just balanced,
right?
You know, because that it doesn't necessarily have to be a fit of rage and an outburst. It actually can be, I'm calm. You know, you told that story about me having a quick outburst because I tore up a puzzle years and years ago. That was, for that split second, that was some low emotional intelligence, just like, ugh.
You know, and I think about just in myself, evaluating myself. I remember when there's a time when if I dropped something, like let's just say I had a jar of jelly beans. And I knocked it over, oh my goodness, I would be so enraged. It's just like rising that up real quick. Falling over would just enrage me. And I think about now how things like that can happen. That's when I knew, knowing what I know now about emotional, I can see how I've grown because it's a result of being able to say, you know what, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
You know, it's okay.
Yeah. They have difficulty maintaining friendships. It's a problem with them. It's because friendships are give and take.
Yeah, it's work.
Very much
and
so.
And it's compromise.
And you have to maintain a closer, and especially if you want to maintain a close friendship, it requires work on both parts to do equal parts in the relationship. And another indicator is that compassionate towards those friends. You know, you don't necessarily automatically give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, give them grace.
Yeah. And then the last one is they lack empathy. And we mentioned that already. You lack empathy for others and because you really don't understand how they feel the way they feel or why they even feel the way they feel. And they can't place it themselves as far as where did that come from? Right. It's totally foreign to them. And you mentioned something earlier just a second ago about it. You know, someone with a high IQ, and we're going to talk about it later, those people tend to be very successful, especially in leadership positions, because if they have a high IQ and they're in a leadership position, they tend to already be in tune with what somebody else is kind of going through or how they feel or what they may be even thinking about, and it seems like they kind of know the pulse of the people, the organization, their family, other friends. They're very attentive. So that's something that's a positive that we're going to
And something else is that, you know, because we're human, you may have a high emotional IQ in one area, and there may be another area where you may still be growing.
Right.
You know, you may have a high emotional IQ at work, and then maybe at home, you may not. Right. Because a part of that is because it is something that has to be developed. one of the things I realized was that even when Erin was little, I would be trying to teach her a task, and it would frustrate me. And
it would frustrate you?
It would frustrate me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things the Lord showed me, you do the same thing at work every day, over and over and over and over again. And you don't ever seem to get frustrated. So why is it different with her? And I was like, wow. So it helped me to realize that if I can do the same thing at work over and over and over again and not get frustrated, as a parent, it's my job. It's my responsibility. It's what I've signed up for as a parent, to say the same thing, to do the same thing until she gets that, and not to be impatient with her, because she's still learning. She's still growing.
Right. And that same philosophy can be applied to everyone around you, you know, because you have to maintain that balance. You know, I struggle with this, especially when it dealt with kids coming up. You know, you have, sometimes they can seem like they can push your buttons and you just, ugh. I love my daughter as much as life itself, but she is probably one of the only people on this planet that is walking on this planet that can, and she's so skilled at it that she probably don't even know she's doing it.
No, and it's because you're so calm.
Well, that's just a part of my disposition, but
Right.
but like you said, just because I'm calm doesn't mean I have a high emotional intelligence either.
Right.
You know, and that's something that you mentioned already, and that was really key for me, even during reading this and saying, wow, this is questioning me, even in the things that I just gave about that little rundown, to list some of those indicators. And it doesn't mean that just because you had some of the things on that list that you do and you kind of fall into it. We're talking more from it. It's a habit. It's a lifestyle that you do these things, where if you really want to know, go to a person that is the closest to you, that you trust, that is a confidant, and say, do I do any of this stuff on a regular basis?
Right.
You know, having a fit of anger or being oblivious to how somebody feels or some of the other things we're talking about, that is just normal part of being human. But when you have built in a pattern,
a habit of that,
of doing it, you know, then you may want to start thinking about, okay, I need to kind of pay some closer attention to this, because I'm kind of weak, or won't weak. We always say it's a growth area. We always say growth area in this particular thing.
And one of the things that I want us to be mindful of is that it's a journey.
Oh yeah.
You know, when we hear information, it's our responsibility to ourselves to say, you know what, I'm going to work on that.
Right.
You know, because although you could go to someone else and ask them, more than likely, you probably already know.
Right.
And part of what emotional intelligence is you being in touch with you and how you feel and who you are. And as you become in control of you, then you can maybe help somebody else. But a part of it is that if you go to somebody else with a low emotional IQ and you ask them, do you have a low emotional IQ? They're going to say, no, you don't.
Right.
You have to find someone who doesn't have a low emotional IQ for them to be able to be objective.
Right.
Because if everybody around you has the same
low IQ,
then guess what? Then you're going to continue to not ever.
Emotional intelligence. EI, rather. Yeah.
Yes. Emotional intelligence quotient.
Yeah.
Just like it's IQ, it's emotional intelligence quotient. So EIQ.
Yeah. So we getting into this, and it's a good topic, it's a good subject, in that we already covered kind of the assessments. But before, we wanted to say thank you to it. This week has been pretty interesting, because I've had probably 3 people this week that have came up and made a comment to me about the show, which is great, you know, especially, and it wasn't just at church, it was someone, a coworker that I didn't really even know they listened. You know, and they mentioned something about the show that they heard, and I was like, wow, well, good. I'm glad it helped you. Or even we just ran into somebody today that said something while we were at the gym, was like, I love the podcast. Yeah.
And I've had people this week to call.
Okay.
I love the sex show. I love the sex show. I'm like,
sex expectations.
Okay, wonderful.
Well, we'll maybe revisit that one.
Yes, we will.
We had fun that day.
Yeah.
Well, not the fun that if you didn't listen to the show, we won't say about that fun.
Yeah, we have fun.
But this time, we wanted to just say thank you, though, to everyone who listens, everyone who comments. All of them are very encouraging. We appreciate it, because we are doing this only because we want to contribute to helping others get better at their relationships as we get better.
And it's helping us get better.
I was getting ready to say, as we get better at our relationship just with each other and everybody that's in our life and our sphere of life as we live this thing called life.
Right.
That we want to maximize the relationships that we have and be thankful for them. But this time we want to get into got wisdom, got questions.
It's that time. It's that time.
And the good part about this one, though, unless you got a question that I don't know about,
no, we just have two got wisdom.
We got a double dose of got wisdom. A double dose of got wisdom. Yes. And they come from a really good friend of ours who listens to the show, Warren in Chicago.
Warren, we love you.
This is how dedicated I am. The game is going on right now. First week of the NFL season. Green Bay and Chicago. I know Warren is probably listening or watching the game or at the game in Chicago. Right. And I'm doing a podcast because I love the people who are listening. So
we love them too.
But his wisdom was, this is the first one. You can do the second one. Not all reasons for getting married are good, and not all reasons for getting a divorce are bad.
And I thought that was very good wisdom.
Why
because so many times we think that you got to get married. You got to get married. Everyone is not. One of the things that when we were interviewing Sean and Ken, he said the capacity. Mm-hmm. I believe that if you have, this show is perfect for this. If you have a low emotional IQ, you might not want to get married.
Just yet. Yeah, just yet.
Waiting, because being married requires, the Bible says iron sharpens iron. Sure. And everyone sees that and they love that verse. But when iron sharpens iron, sparks fly.
And friction.
And it gets hot. And it's not a pretty picture.
Right.
And so we like the concept of what it produces, but we don't like the process of that.
Sure.
And so I believe that marriage is not for everybody.
Sure.
And just like there are countless examples of when divorce is the only solution.
Sure.
God hates divorce, but He loves us.
Yeah.
And He doesn't want us to be abused or mistreated and I'm not talking about
a bad argument.
Yes,
or
I'm not talking about
anything.
I'm talking about abuse.
Yeah, verbal, mental, emotional,
physical.
Yeah.
That those count. Those are grounds for divorce.
Absolutely, adultery.
And so a part of it is understand. And even adultery is not necessarily it's grounds for divorce, but it doesn't mean
from a biblical
have to
standpoint.
Right.
Yeah, but it's a choice.
It's a choice. And so I thought that was really great because not all reasons for getting married are good, and not all reasons for getting divorced.
And the one thing I can say about that is, even when you think about that situation, you said not everybody wants to get married. Even if you aspire to get married in the future, if you're not already,
unpack your junk.
Because that's what this podcast is really all about. Because you want to be as healthy as you possibly can going into it. And granted, nobody's going to be perfect.
No.
It's never going to be a perfect situation, a perfect time, or perfect person, or any of that. But you can be better than you are today by being equipped.
Right.
Knowledge is power. And as you have knowledge about these things, about relationship, whether it's dysfunctional, emotional intelligence, other things that we've done on the past, all the other episodes,
listening.
all the things that we've kind of covered, we're just trying to help build a solid foundation for you to build upon as you give it. Yeah. And then as far as the divorce or bad, sometimes when you go into a situation, you may not have been equipped as you are today as you were when you did it. And granted, we make mistakes and we go into poor choices. We go into those things not really counting the cost and really jumping into it without even really thinking about it. So that's something that's a very good piece of wisdom from Warren in Chicago. And you said he had another one. And the other one Warren had, what was it?
His wisdom was, if you invite God to your wedding, keep Him in your marriage.
Now, you could tell Warren has been doing some weddings. Because I'm sure he probably uses that one a lot. And it is very good and it is very appropriate.
It is.
And sometimes it is very much overlooked. After the wedding, the preparation.
Because you kind of get married in a church, right?
Most people do. Yeah. You can get married in other places.
So that means you kind of invited him to the wedding.
Yeah, you should have.
Let him be a part of your marriage.
I mean, I would think the person who created marriage
Yeah, we kind of know how to do it.
Yeah, and so that's a good one to actually contribute to too. So Juan, we thank you very much, brother, for Juan from Chicago for contributing to this episode. And if you ever have any questions or comments that you want to send in for Got Wisdom, Got Questions, you can always reach us at the website, which is
richrelationshipsus.com.
Or you can actually send them in via Gmail at richrelationships.us@gmail.com.
And we always record the shows on Wednesday or Thursday night. So if you want to share your Got Wisdom or your Got Question, send it in before then, and we can share it.
Yep, and we will. Got Wisdom, Got Questions.
Yep.
Gil and Renee Beaver's over 30-year relationship is the genesis for the Rich Relationship Podcast, which is designed to empower individuals with the tools, principles, and the community needed to unpack ourselves, our past, and our preconceived notions associated with relationships.
Let's get empty and grow together so that our lives will be filled with love and healthy, rich relationships. Now let's go into our show.
You know, during this episode, we kind of talked about, at the beginning, I talked about some of the things of where you are when it comes to having a low IQ, but you were talking about having some things that we want to give you some information about knowing if you have a high emotional intelligence IQ. Go ahead.
The first one is that the person with a high emotional IQ is not a perfectionist.
They're not
a perfectionist because they understand that really nothing is perfect.
Right.
If you know about yourself, you know the things about you that are not right, you don't expect for things to be perfect. The second one is that you understand the balance between work and play. Mm-hmm. You realize you can't just play, you can't just work. You have to have the balance between the two.
Right.
A person with a high emotional IQ, they embrace change.
Wow. So, see, I just thought about that. That's not one of mine. I'm going to work on that one because change is difficult for me, you know, and it's not so much, again, going back to looking at this show, it's been challenging because it makes you look at yourself to say, oh, wow, why do I? And it's not so much the response is you ask another question to say, why do I have that feeling? Right. Why do I feel the way I feel? Why do I have a problem with change?
Right. And it's getting to the root cause of the emotion and not just dealing with the surface.
Right.
People with high emotional IQ are not easily distracted because they understand the importance of paying attention to tasks and having a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. Another indicator is that they're empathetic.
They have that empathy. We already talked about that, where when it comes to empathy, it's one of the high points. They know their strengths and their weaknesses. Mm-hmm. They are self-motivated. That's an important one. They know how, like I mentioned, if you fall down, get up. One of the things that I wish we would have taught Erin more when she was growing up was that, you hear this generation saying a lot, it's not fair. Yeah. Life is not fair. That's like a mantra today. Life is not fair. Right. So you have to motivate yourself because you understand that you can have wins and losses and good days and bad days. So a person with a high emotional IQ motivates themselves. They don't dwell in the past. Right. Because the past is someplace you should be leaving and not staying in. Because when you think about the past, you can learn lessons from the past or you can get stuck in the past. Yes. Which is one that you don't want to do. No. Because that's not it's a place you're supposed to be passing through, not staying in. They focus on the positive. They rather devote their time and energy to solving problems versus meditating on the sky is falling. That pessimistic thing that I talked about already. And as you listen, you notice that these things are just opposite. Yeah. Which is really important. It's the opposite. And that they set boundaries. That was one that I thought about you when you just said that. Oh my gosh. I struggled with that for so many years. Somebody who has a trouble with saying no. Saying no. You have to learn. And a boundary is not you're trapping yourself in and nobody can get in, you can't get out. A boundary is a healthy bridge that you decide who goes across it. Right. And it's saying, I will, because I could say yes to you, but if I could say no to you, if I said yes to this person. And one of the books that really helped me with that was Dr. McLeod, Boundaries. That book helped me because when you
have a low emotional IQ, or you've had a dysfunctional childhood,
you say yes to everything.
You say yes to everything because you want to please people.
Correct.
And if I have to say yes to you for you to be my friend, then you're not a friend. You're just an opportunistic.
Right.
And so those are some of the indicators of someone with a high emotional IQ. And again, like I said earlier, you may have a high emotional IQ in one area and a low emotional IQ in another area. So the goal is that we have balance in all those areas, and that we allow the Word of God, we allow, the science of human behavior, and we allow our application of all those things to really shape us and help us to become emotionally healthy.
Yeah. And this has been really interesting for us, and we're going to continue to even talk about this, and hopefully we'll come back and revisit it, because it is a journey, like you just said, and it's something that you're going to be on whether you like it or not.
Right.
Because that's something we all have as emotions, and you got them, so you might as well learn how
to navigate them,
because it will definitely help you in your relationships.
Yes.
We've been circling around this subject for weeks, and now that we even mention it on how it actually impacts our relationships, but I want to provide some context for the subjects of emotions that we talked about. And you even mentioned it just here a second ago about knowing that you have a good emotional intelligence, or it's not necessarily a high or a low, but a healthy emotional.
There is a high emotional
But
IQ.
the first one, and we can dialogue about this, is you kind of already alluded to it a little bit, was you have to be personally self-aware and recognize not only yourself, but others and their feelings. That is so important to what a healthy or high emotional intelligence is really all about. I would even say it is the main linchpin to all of this, that you have to know yourself first. You mentioned that a lot, and even in some of the other episodes, because if you don't, you're not going to even be aware, or you can't even begin to even understand how somebody else's feel if you don't even understand your own feelings.
I see, like you gave the indicators of a low emotional IQ. So I'm going to give you some indicators of a high emotional IQ.
Sure.
Number one is you think about your feelings.
Okay.
A person with a high emotional IQ has a very deep sense of social and personal awareness.
And that goes along with this one, yep.
Yes. The second one is you pause. You take the time to think about what you're going to do before you do it. You can't be reactionary.
Right.
You have to think things through. You have to stop. You have to think before you speak.
And going back a little bit to even a point that even doing some things, some research, even in the subject and talking about it, one of the things that I found that I thought was really interesting was, and I shared this with you the other night while we were just kind of dialoguing and talking about it, there are really 6 main emotions that everyone has, but really some research was done at the University of California in Berkeley by a PhD guy and a grad student, Dr. Keltner, and I think he had a grad student named Paul Cowan. But they did the research on this, and that's why I'm crediting them, because it's not me. This is just something that I thought was really interesting, and it was very appropriate because they identified 27 total emotions. 6 are the main category, and of the 6, they kind of break down, and you got some of the other ones that fall into these 6 main ones. And we were talking about it, and you knew, and I think most people will probably get the first 3 right off the bat, which was happy, sad, and anger, fear, disgust, and surprise. So those are the 6 main emotions that people have.
Right.
And the reason why I brought that up, because men, we have probably, I would say, the first 2 of the 3 that we down, which is sad and angry. And not all, I'm just speaking for me.
Right.
That one was very appropriate for me. I was like, oh yeah, I knew that. Right off the bat, because it's easier to, when you're angry about something, you identify with it. That's one of those low emotional, but it's low if it's a habit and that you kind of operate in it, or it's done out of context. And if you're getting angry over the simplest, calmest, most minute things,
the whole source of road rage is
because
we have a culture of people with low emotional IQs.
Right.
because we've prized IQ over EQ.
Right. And so when we're going to provide, in the show notes, we'll give all these things in there that you can just kind of do some looking in it. But go ahead. I'm not going to cut it off. But go ahead. What's the other one?
And so another one is that you strive to control your thoughts.
Okay.
All of our actions are first thoughts.
Right.
And so a part of, how do you learn if you have emotional IQ is that you learn to control your thoughts. You benefit from criticism.
Okay. You have to be able to take in when somebody tells you that something is not quite right.
I have to be able to. Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah.
You're not trying to defend it.
Right.
You're not trying to decide. You're going to pull out the blame thrower. Mm-hmm. You're going to benefit from criticism.
Okay.
You show authenticity.
Okay.
You're okay with your strengths and your weaknesses. You don't have to know everything. You share everything. You share your growth areas and your strengths with the people you're closest to. Now, you can't do that with everybody, but you do need people in your life that you can be transparent with.
Right.
You demonstrate empathy.
Empathy. Yep.
Empathy is really important. That is a big. That's one of the things that I had to really learn to grow. That's the area I had to really learn to grow in.
Right. And empathy is a way to actually get into using that when you just said to grow into is you start paying attention to other people and how they're feeling and trying to
put yourself in their shoes.
Right.
You don't see everything through the scope of your own lens. It's like, wow, well, how would I feel if that was me? Mm-hmm. A part of it is you get you out of the way and you put the other person in as the priority. And that's really what empathy is.
Yeah, because it's going to bring balance and it's going to make you better.
You praise others.
Kind of, okay.
Yeah,
Giving
you
credit
can praise
to
others.
Other people.
You can acknowledge that they're doing well because it's our nature that we crave approval. Mm-hmm. We crave to be praised and spoke highly of.
Like you said in the beginning, words of affirmation are always strong and encouraging.
You give helpful feedback.
Not criticism. There's a definite difference between feedback and criticism. And that feedback is giving somebody feedback to help them improve or get better. Right. Not criticizing, well, you suck. You suck at that, or you're terrible, or whatever.
We call it the sandwich. Two good things, one bad thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, you really need to work on this, but you're really good at this, and thank you for listening.
Right.
So you take feedback, and you can apologize.
Wow.
A person with a high emotional IQ they can apologize. They realize they do things wrong. They realize that they are going to screw up. They're quick to apologize.
And they
they
ownership.
own it. They don't blame the other person.
Right.
You know how to forgive and move on. Because I don't like the term forgive and forget because you're never going to forget.
Sure.
But you know how to forgive and say, you know what, I'm going to move on. I'm going to move past this.
And, I think a lot of times people won't be malicious in their intent all of the time. Sometimes it is literally mistakes that are just made or bad choices or whatever. And unfortunately, you're collateral damage of those choices and decisions. But you may not have been the target of the decision or the choice. You were just you had to deal with some of the fallout. So that's kind of one of the things to think about, that you give a person the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's really important in our relationship, thinking about and applying this to us, is we always credit the other one not with intentionally doing anything wrong.
I know you're not trying to. Even if you say something I don't like, I know it's not because you're trying to hurt me.
Right.
That's what we always say. You're on my team, and I'm on your team, and I may not like it, but thank you for telling me that. I may not like that right now, but I needed to hear that.
Right, because I always want better, and definitely you do the same for me when we come across things that we have to deal with.
So we have two more.
Okay.
You keep your commitments.
That's very important.
Because a person with a high emotional IQ realizes the impact of their negligence on other people. Mm-hmm. They realize that when I don't keep my word, and we were taught that growing up, your word is your bond.
Yeah, because your choices and your decisions are going to affect other people, even if you think they don't.
Yes, you help others. Mm-hmm. I love that you always say that. Happy to be here.
Proud to serve.
Proud to serve. And it's not a cliche. That really is who you are, and it's how you live your life, you know. And the last one is you protect yourself from emotional sabotage.
Wow. Bad
things are going to happen. And you have to know that when you fall, I love that Carmen tells that. She says to Elijah all the time, hey, when we fall down, we get up.
Right.
Because guess what? You're going to fall down.
And one of the things that I was going to even mention in this that you just said, this is something that you kind of do that is very good, that has been very instrumental in helping me identify with emotions, is your optimism for always trying to see the best in most situations. Not all. I mean, there are going to be times where it comes out, but you are the eternal optimist where you want to see the best out of every situation,
and that
every
can
circumstance.
Be good, and that can be bad.
And it's good in this sense because somebody with a high emotional intelligence don't automatically, remember I said at the very beginning of this show, was the pessimistic attitude that a person would have. And I have to admit that I kind of tend to fall in that realm. But that's where you have been a very strong asset for me, because the optimism that you, which is the opposite of pessimist, is someone who's an optimistic. And I thank you, because that has been very instrumental in me trying to see better things and situations that I would naturally gravitate to that pessimism. It's not that bad. It's going to be better. It's kind of being optimistic, but also helping me to reframe and refocus those things, which has been very good.
You know, I remember when we were in, we were both, we've lived in separate,
a lot of different places
together and apart. And I remember having a situation where there was something that I wanted to do, which that's always my life. I always want to do something. And I remember there's not very many people that I talk to about our relationship too, but I have people that I can talk to too. And I remember talking to someone, and
a confidant,
and she was talking to me, and I was like, I just feel like he always blow out my candles. I want to blow out my own candles.
Like on a birthday cake?
Yeah. I said, I feel like he always blow out my own candle.
Wait. So the image
I wanted to do something.
Like a kid at a birthday party. He got his cake in front of him, and somebody comes and I blow out your candles.
Yes.
Okay.
And so she, and the person I was talking to, looking back on it now, her personality is like yours.
Okay.
And her husband's personality is like mine.
Okay.
And so when I said that to her, she was like, wow.
That's a good analogy.
She said, is that how he makes you feel? I said, yeah. She said, well, what he's doing is he's trying to prepare you for what will go wrong. I said, but could I just blow out the candles first?
Right.
And she said, well, what if that's all he has? What if that's all he can bring to the relationship? I said, I'm okay with that.
Right.
But now what I know about emotional IQ is that whatever we bring to the relationship, it can get better.
Right.
And so I think it's important that we understand that while you can't change your IQ,
you definitely,
your EQ can change it. So I think it's amazing how, to me, like I think that this is a gift that God has given us as human beings, that there's some things that, I can't change my parents, can't change my childhood, I can't change my relatives, but you can pick your friends, you can pick your husband. Yeah. And so I think in life you have to learn to celebrate the things that can grow and get better, and know that those other things are there. And so to me, this whole concept of the emotional IQ is a gift to couples.
Right.
In relationship, because nobody is perfect. Nobody is going to bring everything to the table just right. And so I think that in sharing that story, it helped me to realize that she helped me to see you, and I helped her to see herself.
Okay. Oh, okay. Wow. That's good.
And I didn't realize that until doing this. I started thinking about it. So in relationships, when you have people you can be transparent with, it's going to help you and it's going to help them.
And that's so important, because that is all what is required to develop a high emotional intelligence, which is going to make you better at your relationships.
Right.
And we have, and you kind of all even talked about it. We talked about some of the things during this episode of where you're at right now, if you have a low emotional intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
what some of the kind of things that you can do. And you were even sharing some of the things that we actually have kind of covered of what to do to get better at
Right.
emotional intelligence. And those are things that are going to be a lifelong practice.
It's a journey.
And it is definitely a journey.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of journey, we're coming to the end of this episode, the end of this journey. But we appreciate everybody listening. And if you got any questions, comments, or anything, you can always send them in to us, and we'll be definitely listening and looking out for them so we can all get stronger together.
Let's go.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationships.us@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.